Kemaat Kema'u. So tonight is my first night. I'm gonna say actually second because I attempted it last week to do some studying online and doing the Pert M. Haru, but it worked out and it also didn't at the same time. So I decided to switch up my reading material. So tonight I am studying Legends of Egyptian Gods. It's by E.A. Wallace Budge. So I decided this book in particular simply because with a lot of people who are talking about, studying and things like that, a lot of people get caught up in the higher sciences, but yet still don't really know the basic stories, the basic Kemetic stories. So that's why I chose to start out with this one. I figured if other people wanted to read it too, I am kind of revamping my blog, but if you want to send me a DM, there's a PDF or an ebook version of the book. So if you want to study too, just send me a DM or something like that. Let me know and I can send it to you. So obviously I am not going to read the whole book tonight, but over the course of the rest of the month, I am hoping to split it into 4 parts and just read, and you can read along with me. We can talk about what it is we're reading and just take it from there. So I am starting actually, and then before I even get started, I thought it was kind of funny because I'm currently in a Seshmedu Netra class, and I remember after last week trying to read the Pert M. Haru because, you hear so many people say, oh, the Pert M. Haru, you have to read the Pert. It's like this imperative book that you need to read. And I tried to read it, and it wasn't necessarily the content, but what threw me off is I would be trying to look some things up, and it would just seems like it's out of order or all over the place. And it's something about the numbering of the plates and things like that that just kind of really threw me off. So I'm just going to wait on that one. So I figured this would be a little more straightforward. But I'm being like a good and a bad student all at the same time because I am, again, skipping the commentary and I am skipping the, I am really and truly skipping the introduction and the prologues and things like that. Like, I hate to say it, I really do just want to get into the actual text. So forgive me. Feel free to fuss at me for being a bad student in that way. All right, I'm starting on technically page 1. It is the history of creation. The book of knowing the evolutions of Ra and the overthrowing of Apep. These are the words which the god Nebuchadnezzar spake after he had came into being. Let me take my glasses off because why am I a far-sighted person with glasses on reading a book? Hello. I am he who came into being in the form of the god Kepra, and I am the creator of that which came into being. That is to say, I am. I am the creator of everything which came into being. Now the things which I created and which came forth out of my mouth after I had come into being myself were exceedingly many. The sky, or heaven, had not come into being. The earth did not exist, and the children of the earth and the creeping things had not been made at that time. I myself raised up from out of the new, from the state of helpless inertness. I found no place where I could stand. I worked a charm upon my own heart, or will. I laid the foundation of things by Ma'at, and I made everything which had form. I was then one by myself, for I had not emitted from myself the god Shu, and I had not spit out from myself the goddess Tefnut. And there existed no other which could work with me. I laid the foundations of things in my own heart, and there came into being multitudes of created things, which came into being from the created things, which were born from the created things, which arose from what they brought forth. I had union with my closed hand. I embraced my shadow as a wife, and I poured seeds into my own. And I had sent forth from myself issue in the form of the Necheru, Shu, and Tefnut. Said my father knew, my eye was covered up behind them, i.e., Shu and Tefnut. But after 2 hen periods had passed from the time when they departed from me, from being one God, I became 3. I came into being in the earth. Then Shu and Tefnut rejoiced from out of the inert watery mass wherein they were, and they brought to me my eye, i.e. the sun. Now after these things I had gathered together my members, and I wept over them. And men and women sprang into being from the tears which came forth from my eye. And when my eye came to me, and found that I had made another eye in the place where it was, i.e. the moon, it was wroth with, or raged at me. Whereupon I endowed it with some of the splendor which I had made the first eye, and I made it to occupy its place on my face, and henceforth it ruled throughout all the earth. When there fell on them their moment, through plant-like clouds, I restored what had been taken away from them. Oh, I see all these highs. Hi, everybody. I'm like trying to read and pay attention. I'm sorry. Where was I? I'm gonna go back a second. Where there fell on them their moment, through plant-like clouds, I restored what had been taken from them, and I appeared from out of the plant-like clouds. I created creeping things of every kind, and everything which had come into being from them. Shu and Tefnut brought forth Seb and Nut, and Seb, which I assume would be Geb, and Nut brought forth Asar and Harukuti and Ma'ati, and Satesh and Oset and Nebahet at one birth, one after the other, and they produced their multitudinous offsprings on the earth. So, as we know, or if we don't know, we now know that there are multiple creation stories within Kemet. So that was creation story A. This one's creation story B. The book of knowing the evolution of Ra and the overthrowing of Apep. These are the words of the god Nebuchadnezzar, who said, I am the creator of what hath come into being, and myself came into being from under the form of the god Khepra. Again, all kind of alerts. Coming in the Khepra. And I came into being in the primeval time. I came into being in the form of Khepra, and I am the creator of what did come into being. That is to say, I formed myself out of the primeval matter, and I made and formed myself out of the substance which existed in primeval time. My name is Asar, who is the primeval matter of the primeval matter. I have done my will in everything in this earth. I have spread myself abroad therein, and I have made strong my hands. I was one with myself, for they, aka the Necheru, had not been brought forth, and I had emitted from myself neither Shu or Tefnut. I brought my own name into my mouth as a word of power, and I forthwith came into being under the form of things which are, and under the form of Khepra. I came into being from out of the primeval matter, and from the beginning I appeared under the form of the multitudinous things which exist. Nothing whatsoever existed at that time in the earth, and it was I who made whatsoever was made. I was one by myself, and there was no other thing who worked with me in that place. I made the things under the forms of which I appeared, then by names of the sole God, which I raised into firmness at that time from out of Nu, from the state of inactivity. I found no place whatsoever, or whereon I could stand. I worked by power of spell by means of my heart. I laid a foundation for things before me, and whatsoever was made, I made. I was one by myself, and I laid the foundation of things, my heart, and I made the other things which came into being, and the things of Kepra, which were which were manifold, and their offspring came into existence from the things which they gave birth. It was who emitted Shu, and I was who emitted Tefnut. And from being the one Neter, or the only Neter, I became three. The two other Neteru who came into being on this earth sprang from me, and Shu and Tefnut rejoiced from out of the Nu in which they were. Now behold, they brought my eye to me after 2 hen periods since since the time which they went forth from me. I gathered together my members which had appeared in my own body, and afterward I had union with myself, and my heart came unto me from out of my hand, and seed fell, and I emitted from myself Shu and Tefnut, and so being the one, or the only one, I became three. Thus the two other Neteru who came into being on this earth sprang from me, and Shu and Tefnut rejoiced. From out of the Nu from out of the Nu in which they were. My father Nu saith, they covered up and concealed my eye with the plant-like clouds which were behind them, for there were many hen periods, plants and creeping things from the god Rem. Again, I think that's Geb, or supposed to be Geb. Through the tears from which I let fall, I cried out of my eye, and men and women came into existence. Then I bestowed upon my eye the Urat of fire, and it was wroth with me from another eye, aka the moon, came up and grew in its place. Its vigorous power fell on the plants which I had placed there, and it set order amongst them, and it took up its place in my feet, and it doth rule the whole earth. Then Shu and Tefnut brought forth Asar, Haru, Kuti, and Ma'ah, and Setesh, and Oset, and Nebathet. And behold, they have produced offspring that have created multitudinous children in this earth, by means of being which came into existence from the creature which they had produced. They invoked my name, and they overthrow their enemies, and they make words of power for overthrowing of Apep, whose hands and arms keepeth ward. His hands and arms shall not exist, his feet and legs shall not exist, and he is chained in one place, whilst Ra inflicts upon him the blows which are decreed for him. He is thrown upon the accused back. His face is slit open by the reason of the evil which he hath done, and he shall remain upon his accursed back. Ankh and Ma'at meant to. I'm like really late, but I see you. So I'm going to get back to that, but I think it's really interesting, these two versions of the history of creation between A and B. The second one, I think it's quite interesting because they both start out by saying the evolution of Ra and the overthrowing of Apep, but it's only the second story that really talks about Apep and the actual overthrowing between these two forces. I think that's quite interesting that one would start out, but the first story ends with the birth of Asar, Set, Haru, Or, Setesh, and Nebathet. I'm saying it out of order. I'm looking at the book. I don't get my odds. So I just think that was really interesting. The other reason why, I know it's not very popular to read Budge's books, but I like them a lot because it has all of the glyphs right there. So my hope one day is that I could actually read that. So that's kind of why I keep them around. Oh, hello blurriness. Let's see if we can fix that. Oh, okay, Jehudi. Jehudi does not want to come in focus. What is going on? Let me see if I can cover it. That is not helping. My bad, y'all. Alright, well, maybe Satesh'll. Let me see if it'll try to focus on something. I got like mad crystals right here. Maybe it'll try to focus. I have 6 chats. Y'all just really heard my crazy ringtone. Oh, the book. The book is Legends of the Egyptian Gods, Hieroglyphic Texts and Translations. So that's it right there. If you want to send me a DM, I can send you like the ebook version of it. I'm just taking a break right now, but before I move on to like the next chapter. But if you want to, don't laugh at my ringtone. If you want to read along with me next week, same time, at least you'll have the ebook version. So, I'm trying to think if I had any more like thoughts or any other, I know one thing that a lot of people do try to, I guess I don't even want to say play out because I kind of don't want to feed into it. It's really bothering me that it's so blurry. I'm so sorry. Let me try to fix this real quick. Let me see if I can fix. All right, let's see. Let me see if maybe it'll kind of. Okay, that is not helping. I really thought that would help. That's so horrible. I feel like maybe I should just move it up. At least, I don't know. You wouldn't be able to see everything, but no, that's even more blurry. What is going on? It's not even Mercury retrograde yet. All right. I'm sorry, y'all. I really am trying to make it unblurry. And it's so funny because I have the same problem when I do Marco Polos. I'm like, last ditch effort, see if that works. Nope. It is still not focusing. So for everybody who likes to play out androids, enjoy this whole moment right now because this is for you. All right, so let me get back to reading. All right, so that's what I was saying. I'm sorry, I got so off task. So a lot of people like to play out or say something about Kemetic people like, like, I don't want to say that we're dirty, but the idea that in the creation story, it says that Ra became one with himself, that he, some versions or translations of the story will say different things about putting seed in the hand, putting seed in the mouth, or something like that. So I think as Kemites, because people take that to be so literal, it can be misleading, especially if you don't study. So, yikes. Let me see if I can. All right, that might be a little better. But it's just that whole idea that, that puritanical idea that, oh my God, you're talking about masturbation. Oh my God, you're talking about, sperm and things like that. And, they try to connect it to homosexuality and things. But it really is that connection, like that idea that semen brings life. And because there was only one Neteru, in a lot of different stories, bodily fluids, especially ancient societies, weren't seen the same way. Like they're not seen like we do now in 2020 because, we're raised and we're just we live in a Christian society, whether we identify as Christian or not. A lot of our ideals, a lot of what society puts in our minds, that's what it has to do with. So that whole idea of semen begetting creation is totally natural. It makes perfect sense. So that's just, I guess, my 2 cents or my thought about that. It seems like people who try to use that that way of looking at things, it's like, okay, they're just still living in a puritanical mindset. They're still, they're not looking at what the story is trying to tell them, or the mythos is trying to really explain about creation and the power of what our bodily fluids actually do. Like that's what they do. So either way. All right, so enough of me. Let me go on to the next story. I don't know why I was like French for 2 seconds there. All right, so the next story, or the next myth, the legend of the destruction of mankind. Technically, this is page 15. Here is the story of Ra, the god who was self-begotten and self-created, after he had assumed the sovereignty over men and women and gods and things, the one God. Now, I keep saying God. We know as Kemites, it's nature for one universal creative energy, if you will. Neteru, if we're talking about specific energies. It's just my somewhat lazy way, just because to try a lot of Budge's books, they're written in the 19th century. So to try to translate the Greek as I'm reading becomes a little interesting. So when I say God, I'm talking about that's true, Mentu. It is immaturity on behalf of the people, referencing the last commentary. So anyway, sorry, back to the story. The legend of the destruction of mankind. Here's the story of Ra, the god who was self-begotten and self-created. After he had assumed the sovereignty over men and women and gods and things, the one God. Now men and women were speaking words of complaint, big difference, saying, "Behold his majesty, life, strength, and health to him," shout out to Mentu, life, strength, and health, "had grown old, and his bones have become like silver, and his members have turned into gold, and his hair is like unto real lapis lazuli. His majesty heard the words of complaint which men and women were uttering, and his majesty, life, strength, and health to him, said unto those who were in his train, Cry out and bring to me my eye, and Shu and Tefnut, and Geb and Nut, and the father Neteru and the mother Neteru, who were with me, even when I was in Nu, side by side with my God Nu. Let there be brought along with my eye his ministers, and let them be led to me hither secretly, so that men and women may not perceive them coming hither, and may not therefore take flight within their hearts. Come thou with them to the great house, and let them declare their plans fully, and I will go from Nu into the places wherein I had brought about my own existence, and let those Neteru be brought unto me there. Now I'm just going to read it how it is. Now the gods were drawn up on each side of Ra, and they bowed before his majesty until their hands touched the ground, and the maker of men and women, the king of those who had knowledge, spake his words into presence of the father of the firstborn gods. And the gods spake into presence of his majesty, saying, Speak unto us, for we are listening to them. Then Ra spake unto Nu, saying, O thou firstborn God from whom I came into being, O ye gods of ancient times, my ancestors, take ye heed to what men and women are doing. For behold, those who were created by my eye are uttering words of complaint against me. Tell me what ye would do in the matter, and consider this thing for me, and seek out a plan for me. For I will not slay them until I have heard what ye shall say to me concerning it. Then the majesty of the Nu, the son of Ra, spake, saying, Thou art the God who art greater than he who made thee. Thou art the sovereign of those who are created within thee. Thy throne is set, and the fear of thee is great. Let thy eye go against those who have uttered blasphemies against thee. And the majesty of Ra said, Behold, they have betaken themselves to flight into the mountain lands, for their hearts are afraid, because of the words which they have uttered. Then the God spake into the presence of his majesty, saying, Let thine eye go forth, and let it destroy for thee those who revile thee with evil words. For there is no eye whatsoever that can go before it and resist thee, and when it journeyeth from the form of Het-Heru. Thereupon the goddess went forth and slew the men and the women who were in the mountain. And the majesty of this God said, Come, come, in peace, O Het-Heru, for the work is accomplished. Then this goddess said, Thou hast made me to live, for when I gained the mastery over men and women, it was sweet to my heart. And the majesty of Ra said, I myself be master over them, as their king, and I will destroy them. And it will come to pass that Sekhet of the offerings waded about in the night season in their blood, beginning at Sutin-Henen. Then the majesty of Ra spake, saying, Cry out, and let there come to me swift and speedy messages, who shall be able to run like the wind. And straightway messengers of this kind were brought to him. And the majesty of the God spake, saying, Let those messengers go to the Abu, and bring unto me mandrakes of great numbers. And when those mandrakes were brought unto him, the majesty of this God gave them to Sekhet, which I imagine is Sekhmet, because that's how I know the story goes. But in here it says Sekhet, the goddess who dwelleth in Anu, to crush. And behold, when the maidservants were bruising the grains for making beer, those mandrakes were placed in the vessels in which they hold their beer, and some of the blood of men and women who were slain. Now they made 7,000 vessels of beer. Now when the majesty of Ra, the king of the south and the north, had come with the gods to look at the vessels of beer, and behold, the daylight had appeared after the slaughter of men and women by the goddess in their season, as she sailed up the river, the majesty of Ra said, It is good, it is good. Nevertheless, I must protect men and women against her. And Ra said, Let them take out the vases and carry them into places where the men and women were slaughtered by her. Then the majesty of the king of the south and the north, in the threefold beauty of the night, caused to be poured out these vases of beer, which make men to lie down or sleep in the meadows of the four heavens, were filled with beer by reason of the souls of the majesty of this God. And it came to pass that when this goddess arrived at the dawn of day, she found these heavens flooded with beer, and she was pleased thereat. And so she drank of the beer and the blood, and her heart rejoiced, and she became drunk. And she gave no further attention to men or women. Then said the majesty, I don't know why I keep wanting to say majesty of God to this goddess. Come in peace, O Ammit. And thereupon beautiful women came into being in the city of Ammit or Amen. And the majesty of Ra spake to this goddess, saying, Let there be made for her vessels of beer which produceth sleep at every holy time in the season of the year, and they shall be in number according to the number of my handmaidens. And from that early time until now, men have been wont to make on the occasion of the festival of Het Heru vessels of beer which make them sleep in number according to the number of the handmaidens of Ra. And the majesty of Ra spake unto the goddess, saying, I am smitten with the pain of the fire of sickness. Whence cometh to me this pain? And the majesty of Ra said, I live, but my heart hath become exceedingly weary with the existence of them. I have slain some of them, but there is a remnant of worthless ones. For the destruction which I wrought amongst them was not as great as my power. Then the gods who were in his following said unto him, Be not overcome by thy inactivity, for thy might is in proportion to thy will. And the majesty of God said unto the majesty of Nu, My members are weak for the first time. I will not permit this to come upon me a second time. And the majesty of the god, Nu said, O son Shu, be thou the eye for thy father, and avenge him. And thou goddess Nut, place him ... This is, if y'all are familiar, sometimes the different papyrus or the different tablets and things like that will be damaged. So there's a lot of dots on this page. It's just so we know. Place him ... And the goddess Nut said, How can this be then, O my father Nu? Hail, said Nut ... to the god Nu. And the goddess straightway became a cow, and she set the majesty of Ra upon her back. ... And when these things had been done, men and women saw the god Ra upon the back of the cow. Then these men and women said, Remain with us, and we will overthrow thine enemies who speak words of blasphemy against thee, and destroy them. Then his majesty Ra set out for the great house, and the gods who were in the train of Ra remained with them, aka with the men, or people. During that time the earth was in darkness, and when the earth became light again, and the morning had dawned, the men had come forth with their bows and their weapons, and they set their arms in motion to shoot the enemies of Ra. Then said the majesty of this god, Your transgressions of violence are placed behind you, for the slaughter of the enemies is above the slaughter of sacrifice. Thus came into being the slaughter of sacrifice. And the majesty of this god said unto Nut, I have placed myself upon my back in order to stretch myself out. When then is the meaning of this? It probably was what? It meaneth that he united himself with Nut. Thus came into being ... Then said the majesty of this god, I am departing from them, aka people, and he must come after me who would see me. Thus came into being ... Then the majesty of God looked forth from its interior, saying, Gather together men for me, and make ready for me an abode for multitudes. Thus came into being ... And his majesty, life, strength, and health be to him, said, Let a great field, Sekhet, be produced in Hetep. Thereupon Sekhet Hetep came into being, and the god said, I will gather herbs therein. Thereupon Sekhet Aru came into being, and the god said, I will make it contain its dwellers' things, Ket, like stars of all sorts. Thereupon the stars came into being. Then the goddess Nut trembled because of the height, and the majesty of Ra said, I decree that supports be to bear the goddess up. Thereupon the props of heaven, He, came into being, and the majesty of Ra said, O my son Shu, I pray thee to set thyself under my daughter Nut, and guard thou for me the supports, He, of millions, which are there, and which live in darkness. Take thou the goddess upon thy head, and act thou as a nurse for her. Thereupon came into being the custom of a son nursing a daughter, and the custom of a father carrying a son upon his head. Oh, okay, so this says, it's like a Roman numeral 2. This chapter shall be said over a figure of a cow. So everything I'm about to read, apparently, I guess it's like an incantation or something. The supporters call He Enti shall be by her shoulder. The supporters called He Enti shall be at her side, and 1 cubit and 4 spans of her shall be in colors, and 9 stars shall be on her belly, and Setesh shall be by her 2 thighs, and keep watch before her 2 legs, and before her 2 legs shall be Shu under her belly, and he shall be made or painted in green color. His 2 arms shall be under the stars, and his name shall be made or written in the middle of them, namely Shu himself. A boat with a rudder and a double shrine shall be therein, and Aten, aka the sun disk, shall be above it, and Ra shall be in it, in front of Shu, near his hand, or another reading half behind him, near his hand. And the udders of the cow shall be made to be between her legs, towards the left side, and on the 2 flanks towards the middle of her legs shall be done in writing the words, the exterior heaven, and I am what is in me, and I will not permit them to make her to turn. That which is written under the boat which is in front shall read, Thou shalt not be motionless, my son. And the words which are written in the opposite direction shall read, Thy support is like life, and the word is as the word there. And thy son is with me, and life, strength, and health be to thy nostrils. And that which is behind Shu, near his shoulder, shall read, They keep ward. And that which is behind him, written close to his feet, in an opposite direction, shall read, Ma'at. And they come in, and I protect daily. And that which is under the shoulder of the divine figure, which is under the left leg, and is behind it, shall read, He who sealeth all things. That which is over his head, under the thigh of the cow, and that which is by her leg shall read, Guardian of his exit. That which is behind the 2 figures which are by her 2 legs, that is to say, over their heads, shall read, The aged one who is adored as he goeth forth, and the aged one to whom praises is given when he goeth in. That which is over the head of the 2 figures, and between the 2 thighs of the cow shall read, Listener, hearer, scepter of the upper heaven, and star. Then the majesty of this God spake unto Jehuti, saying, Uncle Jehuti, saith to Jehuti, saying, let a call go forth for me to the majesty of the God Seb, saying, come with the utmost speed at once. And when the majesty of Seb had come, and the majesty of this God said unto him, let war be made against thy worms, or serpents, which are in thee. Verily, they shall have fear of me as long as I have being, but thou knowest their magical powers. Do thou go to the place where my father Nu is, and say thou unto him, keep ward over the serpents, which are in the earth and the water. And moreover, thou shalt make a writing for me in the nest of thy serpents which are there, saying, keep ye guard, lest ye cause injury to anything. They shall know that I am removing myself, but indeed I shall shine upon them. Since, however, they indeed wish for a father, thou shalt be a father unto them in this land forever. Moreover, let good heed be taken to the men who have my words of power, and to those whose mouths have knowledge of such things. Verily, my own words of power are there. Verily, it shall not happen that any shall participate with me in my protection, by reason of the majesty which had come into being before me. I will decree them to thy son Asar, and their children shall be watched over. The hearts of their princes shall be obedient, or ready, by reason of the magical powers of those who act according to their desire in all the earth, through their words of power, which are in their bodies. And the majesty of this God said, call to me the Neter Jehuti. And one brought the Neter to him forthwith. And the majesty of this Neter unto Jehuti, let us depart to a distance from heaven, from my place, because I would make it light, and the God of light, or Ku, in the Duat, and in the land of caves. Thou shalt write down the things which are in it, and thou shalt punish those who are in it. That is to say, oh, hey, Doug. Sorry about that, y'all. Workers who have worked iniquity or rebellion. Through thee I will keep away from the serpents whom this heart of mine loatheth. And thou shalt be in the place of... It says A with the dot above it, S-T, and then A with the dot, S-T-I. So I assume it's Osset, but then Osseti. Anyway, and thou shalt therefore be called, O Jehuti, the Osset of Ra. Moreover, I give thee power to send forth, ... Thereupon shall come into being the Ibis, bird of Jehuti. I moreover give thee power to lift up thine hand before the two companies of the Neteru, who are greater than thou, and what thou doest, or dost, doest, I'm going to go with doest, shall be fairer than the work of the great God Ken. Therefore shall the divine bird Tekeni of Jehuti come into being. Moreover, I give thee power to embrace Ankh, the two heavens, which thy beauties, and with thy rays of light. Therefore shall come into being the moon god of Jehuti. Moreover, I give thee power to drive back the Ha-Nebu. Therefore shall come into being the dog-headed ape, of Jehudi. I imagine that's a baboon. And he shall act as a governor for me. Moreover, thou art now in my place in the sight of all of those who see thee, and who present offerings to thee, and every being shall ascribe praise unto thee, O thou who art God. Whoever shall recite the words of his composition over himself shall anoint himself with olive oil, and with thick, I have no idea what this is, unguent, unguent? I have never heard of that before. If anybody knows what that is or can Google that real quick, what is that? With thick unguent. I wonder if that's something like a fragrance, or is it an herb? I'm not sure. All right, note to self. I need to make sure I have my highlighter for next week, so this way I can remember to look stuff up. Anyway, and he shall have proprietary offerings in both his hands of incense, and behind his 2 ears shall be pure natron. A sweet smelling salve shall be on his lips. He shall be arrayed in a new double tunic, and his body shall be purified with the water of the Hapi flood, or the Nile. And he shall have upon his feet a pair of sandals made of white leather, and a figure of the goddess Ma'at shall be drawn upon his tongue with green-colored ochre. Ochre? Yeah, I really do need a highlighter right now. Oh, anyway, moving on. Whatsoever Jehudi shall wish to recite this composition on behalf of Ra, he must perform a 7-fold purification for 3 days, and priests and ordinary men shall do likewise. Interesting. Definitely need to keep, this is page 37, so if anybody is reading along or, I don't know, taking notes or anything like that, page 37, that sounds like some type of counsel of what we should be doing as Kemites. Anyway, whosoever shall recite the above words shall perform the ceremonies which are to be performed when this book is being read. Oh, I think we all just got initiated real quick. Didn't know that was coming. Oh my goodness. Okay. No, I'm kind of joking, but I definitely need to keep page 37. I need to do some research. And he shall make his place of standing in a circle or at an angle, ... which is beyond him, and his 2 eyes shall be fixed upon himself. All his members shall be composed, and his steps shall not carry him away from this place. Whosoever among men shall recite these words shall be like Ra on the day of his birth, and his possessions shall not become fewer, and his house shall never fall into decay, but shall endure for 1,000,000 eternities. Then the aged one himself embraced the God Nu, and spake unto the gods who came forth at the east of the sky. Ascribe ye praises to the God, the aged one, from whom I have come into being. I am he who made the heavens, and I set in order the earth and created the gods, and I was with them for an exceedingly long period. Then was born the year and ... But my soul is older than it, or Ra's soul is older than time. It is the soul of Shu. It is the soul of Khnemu. And it literally has a question mark next to it. Another thing to Google. Or research in general. It is the soul of Heb. It is the soul of Kek and Keket. Night and darkness. It is the soul of Nu and of Ra. It is the soul of Asar the Lord of Tetu. It is the soul of Sebek, crocodile god, and of the crocodiles. It is the soul of every Necharu who dwelleth in the divine snakes. It is the soul of Apep in Mount Baknu. Look, I glanced up real quick to read a comment, and now I can't find where I left off. Lord, I'm sorry. So the question is, what book is this? Excuse me, Jehudi. So this is the book that's being read right now. So I plan on reading this a little bit. Oh, look at that. No blurriness this time. I plan on reading it a little bit over the month of February. So if you want the ebook version to kind of like read along, or if you would like to read and then, well, my goal was 50 pages a night. So, and we're almost there. But, you know, if you wanted to just kind of talk, I also started like a Facebook group. It's called Comedic Living in the 21st Century. The whole point is like, you know, so we can read the myths, we can just kind of like talk about what, you know, just different beliefs and things like that. So if you would like to, next week we can chat about just what was read so far, or whatever we read next week is fine. So let me finish up. Okay, so I'm on page 39. Oh, thank you, Ma'akara. Ankh and Ma'at Kaika. Ah, my dad is watching, y'all. So let me finish up. When thou sayest this, step forth in the evening and the morning. Oh, I was not there. Hello, where was I? Oh, I was up here. Sorry. Where is the period so I can start? I'm going to start at the top of the page. It is the soul of He. It is the soul of Kek and Keket. It is the soul of Nu and of Ra. And it is the soul of Asar, the Lord of Tetu. It is the soul of Sebek, crocodile gods, and of the crocodiles. It is the soul of every god who dwelleth in the divine snakes. It is the soul of Apep on Mount Bakhau, i.e. the mount of the sunrise. And it is the soul of Ra which pervadeth the whole world. Whosoever saith these words worketh his own protection by means of the words of power. I am the god Hekau, aka the divine word of power. I am pure in my mouth and in my belly. I am Ra, from whom the Necharu proceeded. I am Ra, the light god Ku. When thou sayest this, step forth in the evening and in the morning on thine own behalf, if thou wouldest make to fall the enemies of Ra. I am his soul, and I am his Hekah. Hail thou, Lord of eternity, thou creator of everlastingness, who bringest to naught the gods who came forth from Ra. Thou Lord of thy God, thy prince who didst make what made thee. Thou art beloved by the fathers of the Necharu, on whose head are the pure words of power, who didst create the woman, Erpit, and standeth on the south side of thee, who didst create the goddess who hath her face on her breast, and the serpent which saith, on his tail, which her eye on his belly, and with his tail on the earth, to whom Jehudi giveth praises, and upon whom the heavens rest, and to whom Shu stretcheth out his two hands. Deliver thou me from those two great gods who sit in the east of the sky, who act as wardens of heaven and as wardens of the earth, and who make firm the secret places, and who are called, oh boy, it's the A with the line on the top, AAIU-SU, with a whole lot of vowels. Aiu-su. I'm a hope I said that right. Feel free, if you want to send a little voice memo on the DM, let me know if I'm saying anything right or if I'm mispronouncing anything so I can be better. And ma'anu. Moreover, there shall be a purifying on the ... day of the month ... even according to performance of the ceremonies of the oldest time. Whoever shall recite this chapter shall have life in the Necher Kur, aka in the Duat or in afterlife. And the fear of him shall be much greater than it was formerly upon the earth ... And they shall say, thy names are eternity and everlastingness. They are called, oh Lord, Au He Nefna A Emta Uat Apu. Whew. And Reke Kuatu and Necherpui ... NN Hra Her Shifu. Lord, I'm getting murdered on these pronunciations. Like I said, feel free. This is page 41. If you could say them, send it on over because I need help on those. Whew. Anyway, I am he who hath strengthened the boat with the company of the gods and his Sheeneth and his gods by means of the words of power. All right, let me see. How long is the next chapter? Y'all, that was a long chapter. And there was a lot going on in that one. It's definitely interesting because it's like a lot of incantations and storytelling simultaneously. So it definitely was talking about like how Newt got put up in the sky and the stars were put there and created. I thought it was interesting because I wish I kind of like could just throw up the picture on the screen right now, but I can't. Excuse me. But y'all know that picture, and we've all seen it before, where it's Newt and she's stretched out, and then Geb is on bottom and Shu is in the middle, and so it's like we see that iconography, but the fact that all these different parts of her body had certain protections around it. And like, I think that's the other thing when I read, I'm like thinking and interpreting. So what I was thinking about is like when we go out into every day and, just certain prayers that we can say, certain sage rituals or smudging things that we can do for ourselves before we walk outside. It's just that deep amount of protection, and obviously protecting the sky and protecting the heavens is very important. But it just kind of that was a thought that it brought to my mind, like just how each piece of her was guarded. Oh wow, it's already been an hour. All right, y'all, so I'm gonna stop here simply because I got 20 seconds. So I will pick up next week on page 43, The Legend of Ra and Offset. Like I said, feel free to join the Facebook group. Comedic living for the 21st century, or send me a DM.
We the reflection of our ancestors. We like to thank you for the building blocks you left us. As your spirit possessed us, show you blessed us.